Welcome in, everyone, to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Friday, August 30th around here, and we have a great show for you today because we had a great slate of games yesterday. We're going to break down all of the games yesterday. First, we're going to get into Colorado escaping with a win 31-26 over North Dakota State. We'll get into Minnesota barely missing out on a win after a missed field goal as time expired to lose to UNC 19-17, and then we'll just kind of rapid fire through the rest of the big time results from yesterday just so you guys have the full picture. Then we'll get back into picks. We got to make sure we get in these picks today. Notre Dame versus A&M, we will absolutely pick today. Going to be an incredible matchup in College Station. And then USC-LSU over there in Vegas on Sunday night. Going to be an absolute doozy. So we'll pick both of those today. Definitely really tough ones to pick, but I feel pretty good about what I got. And then I'll give you the best of the rest. There are a couple of games that I just haven't touched on quite enough that I definitely want to get on y'all's radar before we get into Saturday. Some are a little bit more blowout. Some are closer games than you probably think they would be given the teams that are in them. And then we'll finish it off with a little bit of a headline wrap-up. Obviously, the Connor Stallions doc came out this week. There was a lovely little thing that happened at Colorado this week around NIL. A ton of stuff to cover that we will absolutely get to in that segment. But before we jump in, I do want to remind you all we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show, and the best way for you all to get your question on the screen, we can have a fun back and forth here, is to use that super chat feature at the bottom of the screen. You see a little $sign at the bottom of the chat on the Sports Network page. You're more than welcome to click that, leave any comment, any question, any criticism you might have, and I will absolutely recognize you. Sometimes that chat on the side is just a little bit too fast for me to be able to read it and get back to you, so sometimes it's a little bit easier to use that super chat. If that's not the way you want to go about it, you can absolutely use the GSMCpodcast.net page. Still plenty working, and we'll do the exact same thing. So either of those is more than fine, and definitely a fun way for this to get a little bit interactive. But let's jump into those games yesterday, because I was up a little bit late preparing for this one because they gave us some incredible games that went right down to the wire yesterday, and I absolutely love being up late for that reason. So there were so many incredible games, but we got to start with the main event, and we'll start with Colorado and North Dakota State. Colorado escapes with a win, 31-26. North Dakota State was hanging around in this game for quite some time. It felt like Colorado had at least their leg up for most of the game. It felt like they were just an inch ahead for most of the game, but overall, North Dakota State played an incredible game, came about 4 yards from winning this one in dramatic fashion after they caught a Hail Mary. So this one was absolutely incredible, no doubt about it. There were incredible things from this one. Obviously, every time you get to see Ralphie run for the very first time in the year, it's always a special thing. But we got an awesome game as well. In the first half, these offenses were flying around. It was points after points after points, and we felt like we were going to have a 45-40 finish or something crazy. And then the defense started to clamp down. But let's get into a couple of the big time performers, and it's the guys you would expect for Colorado. Shedeur Sanders was magical in this game. There were people on him pretty much every single play. Not every play. The O-line played a little bit better than I was thinking they were going to play, but there was still plenty of pressure. Don't get me wrong. Shedeur Sanders was just money. It was incredible to watch this kid go, and gives you a good reason why NFL scouts are looking at him as the possible number one overall pick. So just an incredible performance from him. He did have one pick that was the weirdest bounce that I've ever seen, and it definitely has the chance to be the weirdest bounce we see on a pick this entire season, but we'll see what happens throughout the next couple of days. But I think it was just really remarkable to watch him go to work. It was one of those things that you've seen some of the maturity get a little bit better. There's still some of that, I'm going to go off and do it on my own and maybe kind of get myself into trouble sometimes. There's still some of that in his game, but at the end of the day, when you have that O-line, you kind of need a little bit in your game in that realm. But who was he throwing the ball to was exclusively Jimmy Horn Jr. and Travis Hunter. They went to work in this game. It was 14 catches between the two of them, 330 yards, 4 touchdowns. So all of the touchdowns that Shedeur Sanders threw went to one of these two guys, and Travis Hunter was special. He had 3 touchdowns in this game. There was no one that was able to guard him, and he made one of the most ridiculous catches on that little kind of fade back shoulder route that he was just blanketed in, and he somehow caught that ball. I have no earthly idea how that's possible. He also is incredible at using leverage. It was incredible to watch this kid where the camera would flash to them and you're thinking, was that OPI? Was he shoving that guy to the ground? He wasn't. He was just playing the leverage incredibly well. Now, there was one that he did get away with, I think, on that touchdown play where he kind of pushed the helmet of the player, but there was another touchdown where he just used the leverage of the guy, tossed him to the side, and caught a very open touchdown. So, as you can imagine, Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter are as special as they've ever been. I don't know the exact number of snaps that Travis Hunter played, but it was a ridiculous amount. I can promise you that. It was almost every single one of the game, and it might have been every single one of the game, honestly, at the end of the day. So just incredible performances from those two guys. On the other side of the ball, they had to worry about one guy, but man, was that one guy good. Cam Miller was incredible in this game, and some of it, a lot of it came in the first half, and then got a little bit stagnant in the second half. But 18 for 22, 358 total yards, 3 total touchdowns, 2 on the ground, 1 through the air. It was really awesome to watch this guy, and frankly, he came out of the gates throwing this ball really, really well. This is a team that I was fully expecting to be very run heavy, and they still were run heavy, but he was hitting really, really incredible passes, and the offensive play calling for the first half was just downright incredible from NDSU. It was very, very hard to get a beat on what they were going to do, on the motions that they were going to take, and where the ball was going to end up. It was really, really incredible from start to finish, so was very impressed from NDSU, but also Colorado just got the job done. That's what they needed to do in this Week 1 game. Now you move on to a big-time game against Nebraska, and some bigger conclusions can be drawn from that one, but overall, I think this is a better team. There's no two ways about that. They're more talented. They make more plays. I love the additions of Preston Hodge and Dayon Hayes on the defensive side of the ball. So I do think they did a lot of really, really good work. And huge shout out to Robert Livingston, the DC, because the defensive adjustments at halftime for this team were huge. And some of it fell on NDSU for the play calling be getting a little bit clunky and a little bit all over the place. But Colorado answered the bell. They were much better at tackling. They did everything that you want them to do, so very good performance. Overall, they did exactly what I expected them to do. Now, there are still some worries. There's no doubt about that. Walking out of this game, I didn't necessarily walk out feeling any differently about this Colorado team going through the rest of the season. I still think the O-line has some problems in front of them. The run game is still non-existent. They brought in Dallin Hayden to be that go-to running back. He's not even the starter. It's Charlie Offendahl, and it's not going to work. Just plain and simple. So they don't feel very good about that O-line. And frankly, I think this is a much more talented team. They are capable of making much more plays. They are still roughly the same team they were a year ago in terms of the deficiencies that they have. The O-line, the D-line are not good enough. The defense is very porous at times and allows those big plays. So they're going to have to fix some things up. There's no doubt about that, especially heading into a Nebraska game next week. But they are a better team. I can say that with absolute confidence. They do just about everything better. There's just still those big-time holes that could hurt them when it comes around to Big 12 play or even next week against Nebraska. But incredible game, huge win for Colorado, and they move forward to what could be one of the bigger games in their entire season next week. Moving on, North Carolina snuck out with a really, really ugly win in this one. 19-17 over Minnesota. Minnesota missed 2 field goals throughout this game, but they missed one as time expired to lose it, I believe 47-yarder. So definitely really tough for that kid. He missed one earlier in the game, missed one late. Obviously, he's got a lot on his shoulders today, but overall, this was a defensive battle. This was an absolute war from start to finish. It was incredible to watch these teams go to work. Max Johnson played good football for UNC. It wasn't necessarily anything incredible, but he did make enough plays with his legs, was gritty enough, and does the things that you know Max Johnson to do. You know, it's not going to light up the scoreboard. It's not going to do anything crazy, but he can make some winning plays here and there. Had a rushing touchdown in this game. So overall, I think this is a North Carolina team that is okay. Now, Max Johnson going down with an injury in this game definitely adds a huge precarious part to this season, and Connor Harrell came in and played more than fine, set them up for a game-winning, or what ended up being a game-winning field goal, but at the end of the day, Omarion Hampton is the entirety of this offense, and that is a huge problem for this team. He had 30 carries, 129 yards, and 0 touchdowns on Saturday. It wasn't like he lit the world on fire. It was just every single play was through him. Whether it was running or passing, he was all over the place, and it made it relatively easy for this Minnesota defense to just key in on him and say, if we stop him, we're likely in pretty good shape. And then on the other side, it was kind of the same exact approach, to be totally honest with you. They wanted to run the ball, and Marcus Major, the transfer over from Oklahoma, did that really, really well. 20 carries, 73 yards, a touchdown, did plenty for this team and was a very, very physical runner throughout this game. Definitely gave them a really good shot. And then Max Brosmer, the very talented quarterback that came over from New Hampshire, started slow, put together a nice final drive to put them in a position to win, but then obviously that kick fell short. It's one of those things that it was his first Power 5 game. It was never going to be super pretty. It was never going to be, him just coming out and gunslinging all over everyone. So we'll see what happens throughout his career. But overall, a very fun game, a very sloppy game, but that's week 1 college football for you. A big-time win for UNC. They do have to figure out what Max Johnson's status is going forward because it was pretty clear they felt Max Johnson was the best guy because Connor Harrell didn't touch the field until Max Johnson went down. So that's obviously the quarterback one. If they have to move on without him this year, it could be tough. And frankly, by the looks of that injury, they probably will have to move on with him at least for a little bit without him. So that's definitely an incredible game, but let's do a little rapid fire here to finish it off. NC State won that game 38-21 over Western Carolina. This one was ugly. No one told North Carolina State that they had to play for the first 3 quarters, and they didn't. Kevin Concepcion was downright special, had 3 touchdowns. Justin Jolie made plenty of plays. Grayson McCall answered the bell when he absolutely had to, and Jordan Waters had one very aggressive touchdown run for that to kind of seal that victory, put them up 10, and West Carolina was pretty much done from there. They missed a field goal, long touchdown for Jordan Waters to make it look a little bit better, but at the end of the day, the running game is a problem for this NC State team. They have to figure that out because before that 50-yard run, they had nothing doing, and Grayson McCall was good. He was plenty good, but they definitely going to need to step up there. There's no doubt about that. So a win at the end of the day, but if they don't fix things before next week against Tennessee, they might just get run out of the building, honestly. But let's just give you the rest of the Thursday night football matchups. Missouri gets a big-time win over Murray State. Toriano Pride Jr. got a big pick 6 in that game, so the transfer from Clemson is already paying dividends for them. Utah rolls over Southern Utah. Dijon Stanley is the guy I want to talk about, a running back that is really lethal out of the backfield. 150 yards receiving, 2 touchdowns. Cam Rising, 10 for 15, 254, 5 touchdowns. Brant Kuthi, 3 touchdowns. You saw everything you needed to see from Utah yesterday. Kansas dominates Lindenwood 48-3. Jalen Daniels wasn't perfect, but ran for over 300 yards. That's going to be the MO of this defense. Wake Forest controls North Carolina A&T 45-13. Hank Brockermeyer came out spinning the ball, 18 for 28, 263 and 3 touchdowns. Very talented kid. Illinois handles Eastern Illinois 45-0. Luke Altmaier had 5 incompletions. He had 4 touchdowns, so a very clean game. Tulane's an interesting one. They won very comfortably over Southeast Louisiana, but it looked like going into this game we were going to see all 3 quarterbacks, and technically we did for Tulane, but it was Darian Mensah that really got the vast majority of the snaps here. Went 10 for 12, 200 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's going to be your guy going into Kansas State, and then we'll see where this thing lands after that. Then Rutgers got a big-time win. It was all over. It was all Kyle Monaghan. 19 carries, 185 yards, 1 touchdown. And then Ethan Kaliak-Manis had a very nice game, 3 touchdowns, over 200 yards total, so did plenty. UCF beat New Hampshire by a ton, but KJ Jefferson was KJ Jefferson. 7 for 14, 162 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. You need way more than that if you're going to win the Big 12. Now, they did run for 400 yards, so that got to make you feel a little bit better. Coastal Carolina blowing out Jacksonville State might have been the biggest surprise of the evening because Jacksonville State's a really good team. Coastal Carolina was able to run for 57 times for over 300 yards. That's exactly the way they want to win a football game. And then Taylon Green put on a show for Arkansas as they blew out Arkansas Pine Bluff. This was an obvious blowout spot, but at the end of the day, when you get to see a stat line of 16 for 23, 229 through the air, 2 touchdowns through the air, 88 yards on the ground, and 2 touchdowns on the ground, you feel pretty good if you're an Arkansas fan about that quarterback he just brought in. So an incredible night of football. There's no two ways about that. We got a couple of really incredible games and then just some really great performances all around the country, highlighted by Taven Green just going insane yesterday. But we'll take our first break here, and when we come back, we're going to break down all of the rest of the week 1 games. We'll get to Notre Dame A&M right now, then we'll get to USC-LSU after the next break. But let's focus on Notre Dame A&M right after this, so stick with us.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows where 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just broke down all of the craziness that happened yesterday. Colorado got a big-time win over NDSU. We got Minnesota barely missing out on a win at home over North Carolina. So a ton of really, really good games yesterday. But now it's time to get into Saturday. We have so many great games on Saturday. We've already broken down a number of the big-time games throughout this week. So if you want to go check those out, you're more than welcome to. But let's focus on A&M versus Notre Dame here for a second, because this one's going to be fun. It is the primetime game. Game day will be there, so a ton of energy around this one, and I think this one's going to be an absolute doozy. We have so many incredible players in this game. We have so many different storylines going in, but A&M is the favorite team going in. They're favored by about 3 points, 2.5, depending on where you look. Notre Dame is one of those teams that really hard to get a beat on going into this season. So I'm not all that surprised that A&M is favored in this game. Over-under at 46.5, and I think this one's going to be awesome. Primetime event, obviously. Whoever walks out of this one with a win is going to be thinking they can make the CFP, the college football playoff. There's no doubt in my mind. They absolutely will be staring at that as not only something that they'd love to do, but something that they very much think that they can and honestly should do by that point on. So it's going to be an incredible game. Obviously, the CFP implications are huge, but let's move on to some players to watch in this one, because Jeremiah Love is downright special. I cannot wait to watch this guy be the running back 1 for this team, because I think his athletic ability is unlike a lot of other running backs across the country. I think he can do stuff on the football field that is downright special, and whether it's running in between the tackles, outside the tackles, screens, drop-offs, anything you need him to do, he can do it. And he's one of those guys that Notre Dame doesn't necessarily have the prerequisite talent at wide receiver that a lot of these other teams have. This might be their Swiss Army knife that can make all of that go away very quickly. So very much like this kid, and I think a lot of more people will know that name by the end of Saturday. Jason Onye is another guy I want to watch, because when you talk about this A&M offense in general, or team in general, the offensive line is the place that you're a little bit worried about. A year ago, it was probably their worst unit on their team, and I think they could be slow out of the gate. Not necessarily thinking they're going to be, just what they were a year ago, but I think there's a reality where, especially against this defensive front for Notre Dame, it just looks a little clunky out of the gates, and this would be a big reason for that. So very much like Jason Onye, and I think he's going to make at least a couple of plays in this game. Le'Veon Moss is an obvious example here, because no Reuben Owens, you're going to need someone to step up, and he is definitely going to be the go-to back for this team. Amari Daniels is a very good player. E.J. Smith, Emmitt Smith's son, is going to be able to make some plays, but at the end of the day, he's going to be the load carrier. He's going to be the guy that they're pointing to every single down. So excuse me, I apologize. But at the end of the day, it will be interesting to see what he's able to pull off. Very talented kid, someone that can absolutely do anything they want him to do, but was just thrust into a little bit more of action this upcoming year. And then finally, Torian York is a guy that definitely needs more recognition. One of the best linebackers in the entire country, and this easily could have been Nick Scourton, and we will get to him a little bit later. But at the end of the day, when I look at what they're going to need to do to stop this Notre Dame offense, it starts with the guy I talked about to lead this off. Jeremiah Love is so dangerous out of the backfield. He's so dangerous all over the field that Torian York is likely going to get that assignment quite a bit and is likely going to be the green dot guy for this team. So he's going to have a lot on his plate on Saturday. And I think if that defense succeeds, it's likely because Torian York had a very, very good game, whether it's communication or guarding Jeremiah Love out of the backfield or just making all the tackles that he's going to make, I'm sure. But big time storylines heading into Saturday. There are so many to talk about, but I think the biggest one is these O-lines are weak if you're looking in the grand scheme of college football. They are definitely weak as you walk into this year, and it's mainly on the Notre Dame side. You know, losing Charles Jagusa, your starting left tackle, and having to move everything around. Anthony Knapp, a freshman, starting at left tackle. I believe Sam Pendleton starting at left guard, if I'm not mistaken. Both guys that have not made a start in their career. Going to be very interesting how that left side of that offensive line looks. And then on the A&M side, we talked about it. It definitely was the worst unit a year ago. Returns 3 starters, so maybe everything has gotten a little bit better. Trey Zune over at left tackle is someone they really like, so it's probably not going to be quite as bad as a year ago, but definitely an area that Notre Dame could take advantage of. Former head coach and quarterback duo are facing off in this game. Kind of the weird world of the transfer portal is this can happen every now and then, and it'll be really interesting to see how Mike Elko approaches guarding his old quarterback, because he knows a lot about what Riley Leonard can do on that football field, and it'll be fascinating to see just how he goes about business. And then on the other side, what does Riley Leonard know about Mike Elko's defense, and could he expose it? A very, very smart player that maybe picked up a couple of things that he's able to expose on Saturday. And then coaching changes on both sides are a huge part of this. I believe both play callers on both sides of the ball for both of these teams have changed this past offseason, where Colin Klein came in to be the OC for A&M, while Mike Elko is likely going to be the play caller on the defensive side of the ball. And then you have Mike Denbrock and Al Golden calling plays at OC and DC respectively for Notre Dame. So elite play callers going at it. It's going to be so much fun to watch the little intricacies, the chess match, if you will, of this game. But let's get into how these teams can win. And we'll start with Notre Dame. Get the ball out of Riley Leonard's hands quickly is the number one thing. This O-line is not going to be able to hold up all day. I do think they are going to be a good O-line throughout the year. I think Anthony App, frankly, is going to be a star throughout his career and at Notre Dame. I think the first week is going to be a little bit rough. He's going to get a lot of Nick Stewart. He's going to get a lot of Shamar Stewart, or a lot of Nick Scourton, a lot of Shamar Stewart at Kyle Field, and it's going to be really tough. There's no doubt about it. So getting Riley Leonard out of really bad situations, whether it's dumping it off to Jeremiah Love or Jadarian Price, or getting the ball out quickly to guys like Jordan Faison or Jaden Greathouse or Chris Mitchell, all of these guys are very talented, and you have the ability to set up those concepts for yourself. Now, they don't necessarily have that speedster that you'd love to have in this kind of scenario, but they got plenty of guys. And then you have that big-time tight end, Mitchell Evans. It's all about just making sure Riley Leonard is upright and not having to get into precarious situations with that O-line. So get the ball out quickly, kind of like what Colorado did yesterday, where it wasn't the greatest O-line performance, but got the ball out of Shedeur hands very, very quickly, ran the ball to the outside instead of the inside so they didn't get blown up quite as much. A lot of different things that they were able to kind of negate the O-line just a little bit on Saturday, and I think that's likely the approach for Notre Dame. And then get after Connor Wegman. This is a very talented kid who's been very efficient through 9 games and playing, where 16 touchdowns, only 2 picks throughout that, and they both came in a Miami game last year, and in that Miami game, they heated him up a ton. They made him very uncomfortable in that pocket, and he was a little bit early on in his starting career, so nothing crazy by any means, but this is the reality. If you can get after this guy, if you can make him move his feet just a little bit too much and make a throw just a little bit off balance, then guys like Benjamin Morrison, guys like Xavier Watts are just going to eat that up and take it for 100 yards. That's just the reality of this back end. So if you can get home, if you can make this guy uncomfortable, you're going to do a lot of special things on defense on Saturday. And then find that difference maker on the outside. Period. End of story. This is something they need. If they don't get this throughout the season, there's no world where they make any type of noise in the playoff or even make the playoff, honestly. But Chris Mitchell is the guy that I'm circling. Obviously, the transfer from FIU that had over 1,000 yards a year ago, that's going to be the guy that you're going to want to watch, number 10 with that gold helmet. But then Jaden Greathouse is another guy I'm watching. He had a really good start to his career with 2 touchdowns against Navy in that Week 0 matchup, but kind of slowed down throughout the year. I still think a very talented kid and someone, he's in the slot position, so is a little bit of a mismatch in that slot position with the body size and the body control, so very much like this kid, and I think he might just be able to be that guy on the outside for Notre Dame this year. Moving on to A&M, expose this inexperienced O-line. Just tear them to pieces, because that's the way that you're really going to be able to win this. It would keep the Riley Leonard legs kind of out of the conversation just a little bit. It would make this offensive line super nervous, and Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price would not be able to get downhill. So this comes down a lot to the edge rushers, whether it's Nick Scourton, Shamar Stewart, Cassius Howell, Solomon Shields. All of those guys are going to get after the quarterback, no doubt about it. But then you need some guys like Shamar Turner on the inside to just absolutely impose their will, to just dominate the interior of this line. And he's going to get Sam Pendleton, that left guard, a ton in this game, and I wouldn't be surprised if Sam Pendleton ended up on his back a couple of times in this game. So this is the goal. If you can limit the time that Riley Leonard has to digest this offense, especially with the Mike Denbrock offense that takes a little bit of time to develop, you might just be able to get a couple of sacks, and that might just be the entirety of the difference in this game overall. And then get enough from your O-line. Both of these defensive line versus O-lines, it firmly goes in the defensive line direction. But if you can get enough from this group, if this group that returns 3 starters, if they have gotten better from a year ago, and you can just shield these guys off and just give them enough time to get the ball out of Wegman's hands early, which is something we'll talk about here in a second, and just make sure that he's comfortable, you're going to be off to the races. So talking about Connor Wegman, get him in a rhythm early, because this is one of those quarterbacks, kind of like Garrett Nussmeier over at LSU that we'll talk about in the next segment, but it's kind of like him where you have this incredible ability to put the ball really wherever you want and throw it with confidence and do all of these incredible things throwing the ball. You got to get going. You got to get that confidence. You got to get that juice behind you, especially for a guy that has not played a college football game in quite some time. So he's going to have to be ready. It's going to be a lot of adrenaline, really high. Just let him kind of settle into this one. Just let him get those quick routes to Amari Daniels out of the backfield, or Cyrus Allen on the outside, Noah Thomas, maybe just throw one up to him and let him go make a play. Just get this guy really comfortable, because then when he's comfortable, it's going to be outright terrifying. The dude can put the ball wherever he wants. He can throw with absolute confidence, but you got to get there before you can do all those things. So I think Connor Wegman is one of those guys that the ceiling is through the roof, and if they can get him into rhythm early on, this Notre Dame defense, as good as they are, might just not have an answer for him, honestly. But moving on to the picks for this game, man, I fought back and forth on this one. I'll be totally honest with you. There's not a good feeling in my gut about the way this game is going to go, but I'm going to go with a couple of things that I can say absolutely confidently. Nick Scourton is going to be an absolute problem against Anthony Knapp, and this A&M crowd is going to be on fire. So give me the Aggies. I think they're going to be able to pull this one off at home, 24-18. This one's going to be gross. I can promise you that. This is going to be a heavy run game. Neither of these teams are going to be able to air the ball out too much in this one, but I think A&M makes enough plays on the defensive side of the ball. I think they make one big-time takeaway, and I think Riley Leonard's legs, which could have been the X factor in this game, are taken out a little bit. Now, maybe they're not taken out, and maybe that is the X factor and it goes the opposite direction, but as of right now, I am going to go with the Aggies at home, one that I feel okay about. That I think that's probably as good as you're going to feel about a pick for this game, and probably about as good as I'm going to feel about the pick for the next game. Right after this break, we're going to get into LSU versus USC. This one's a nightmare because you have no earthly idea what these defenses are going to look like, and you got no earthly idea who's going to have the ball last, which might just be the deciding factor in this game. So it's going to be incredible to break this one down, but we'll take our second break, and right after this, we will break that one down, so stick with us.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it?
GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just broke down the Notre Dame A&M game, the primetime game on that Saturday. I am going to pick the Aggies. I don't feel great about that, but going to Kyle Field, I think that's going to be the big-time difference maker for them. So I'll pick the Aggies for the time being, and we'll see where that stands on Monday morning. But let's get into LSU USC. This one's going to be so much fun. I think everyone's circling this one as the one you just got to be on the couch for, because it's not about, how much you care about these teams. It's not even about how much you hate these teams in some respects. It's about the amount of points that are going to be scored. This one is going to be absolutely up and down the field. Neither of these defenses look all that strong going into this year, and these offenses look really strong. So I'm so excited for this one. LSU favored by 4 points right now out in there in Las Vegas. USC, 63.5 is the over-under. USC coming into this game with a lot of energy. There's no doubt about that. I think they have this kind of chip on their shoulder mentality. A lot of people telling them, you can't just fix a defense over one offseason. I tend to agree with that statement, but they're trying to prove people wrong. They're trying to show that they've made big-time strides and they're ready to kind of get into that Big Ten conversation right away. So this one's going to be incredible at Sunday at 7 p.m. or 7:30 p.m. Don't want anyone tuning in just a little bit too early, but I think this one's really, really hard to pick. Probably the hardest game of the weekend to pick just because of how many people are going to have an impact on this game and how crazy it's going to get throughout it. But I'm going to start with all the players you got to watch, and not Torian York, obviously, but Ashton Stamps is the guy that I want to start with. He's the standout corner from fall camp for LSU, and they badly needed one. He played really, really good ball throughout fall camp, and it's hard to kind of get a beat on that. Obviously, fall camp is a little bit of a zero-sum game, but at the end of the day, I think this is going to be their top guy, and he better be ready to roll. Now, they're going to need more than one guy because there are about 4 USC wide receivers that are going to be a problem, and we'll get to one here in a second, but as long as Ashton Stamps comes to play, at least you feel a little bit better about that back end. And then Adam Anderson is the guy I'm watching on the offensive side of the ball, because this wide receiver room for LSU, very, very talented. I don't see a clear wide receiver 2 in this room. I know Kyron Lacey is going to be the guy. I feel very confident in that. But I don't think CJ Daniels has come along the way that they wanted to. I don't know if Chris Hilton is the guy that really fits that role. I think Adam Anderson could be. I think he has tons of ability, has played really good ball throughout fall and spring camp, so I think he might just take that next big step, and maybe he's the guy that makes the big-time play down the stretch of this game. For USC, Kamari Lassiter is the obvious choice for me. DeAnton Lane came in and he brought over Kamari Lassiter from UCLA, and this is going to be the general of the back end. He's going to be the quarterback of the back end, and he's got to be ready for a lot of stuff because he's going to see so many passing concepts, so many weapons all over the field, and a quarterback that is really good in Garrett Nussmeier. But at the end of the day, there are going to be opportunities to make a big play in this game. At some point, a defensive play is going to be presented, and maybe it's Kamari Ramsey making that big-time play for USC. And then Jacoby Lane is just incredible. USC has about 4 guys in this room that are just going to be outright awesome this upcoming year, and I don't know if they have a wide receiver 1, but they might have 4 wide receiver 2s that very well could be wide receiver 1 on any given week. And then the other guy I would watch is a very talented sophomore player, Deuce Robinson. In fact, all of these guys I think are sophomores, so a lot of really impressive young talent, and it's going to be a handful for that LSU back end, I can promise you that. But getting into this one, there are so many different storylines heading into this one, but the biggest one for me is obviously the new faces on defense. DeAnton Lane comes over from UCLA to take over USC's defense, and it was downright bad a year ago and has been downright bad pretty much throughout the entirety of Lincoln Riley's head coaching career. So something they got to figure out. I think they hired a fantastic guy, so I think it's going to get there, but maybe it takes a little bit of time. And then Blake Baker on the other side, coming over from Missouri to take over the LSU job. Incredible coach. Again, personnel and all the other stuff might not be all the way there, but we'll see who can make the biggest impact on Sunday. And then you have two quarterbacks that are filling Heisman-sized shoes. There's no doubt about that. You have incredible players walking out the door at both of these universities, and Miller Moss and Garrett Nussmeier. I don't know why I can't say his name right now. Garrett Nussmeier taking over for two guys that are just incredible. Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, the last two Heisman winners, the top 2 picks in the NFL draft. This is about as much pressure that these two quarterbacks could have, and about as big of shoes as they could possibly fill. And then the final one for me is, could this be a springboard moment? I think both of these teams are going into the season saying, if we can find ourselves on defense, if we can do this, that, and the other, we have a chance to make the CFP. If they win this game, I think a lot of that stuff becomes reality. I think a lot of that stuff kind of comes into place, and this USC team that you're going into the Big Ten, you feel a little bit more confident. Not that you're going to be able to, totally handle the physicality, but at least that you're going to be able to win against big-time teams. And then LSU on the other side, if they're able to win this one, you're going into a gauntlet of a schedule, but you already have a really good win, a feather in your cap, if you will. So it's going to be really awesome to watch this unfold. But at the end of the day, I think this one's going to be a battle, and whoever walks out of it will likely be a big-time topic of conversation on Monday around the playoff. But moving on, let's talk about how USC can establish the run against this very weak defensive line. The LSU defensive line has been the big-time story of the offseason, and it hasn't necessarily gotten all that better. I do like Jacoby and Guillory. I do like Jalen Lee. I do like JVR Suggs. I don't love them enough. There's no doubt about that. And Jonah Monheim being at the interior of that USC offensive line is going to give them plenty of push. They brought over Woody Marks from Mississippi State a year ago. Over 500 yards, 4 touchdowns. Nothing crazy in 2023, but a very talented, very physical running back that in Lincoln Riley's offense could do some really special things. So I think this is the game plan. Try to pull the LSU defense in just a little bit, especially Harold Perkins. And let's talk about Harold Perkins here for a second. Find and neutralize number 7. Harold Perkins is the new number 7 over there at LSU, and that's a pretty cool thing for a defensive player to get. If you remember, Tyrann Mathieu, I believe, is the only other defensive player to get it. So just incredible stuff from this guy, and frankly, this could be a game that he just entirely blows up. I think there's going to be points. I think there's going to be plenty of points, frankly. But there could be that one play, whether he has a pick or he has a forced fumble or he makes a big tackle for loss. There is going to be one play that if Harold Perkins makes it, maybe it's the difference for LSU. So finding and neutralizing that guy to the best of your ability, you're not going to be able to stop him altogether, but doing that to the best of your ability is the number one thing you have to do. So it's going to be really interesting. And then on top of that, you don't know where he's going to be. We haven't seen any tape with Blake Baker calling plays for Harold Perkins, so I don't know where he's going to line up. I don't know what type of stunts he's going to run on pass rushes. I don't know if he's going to drop back into coverage a ton. It's going to be kind of a nightmare to figure out just where this guy is first, but then what is his assignment and how do we stop it is going to be really tough. And then Garrett Nussmeier, just put him in obvious passing situations. The biggest story coming out of fall camp for LSU was Garrett Nussmeier did not look all that great when it comes to turnovers. The only way you can really put him in that spot, the only way that you can kind of force him into those situations is put him in 3rd and 8s, put him in 3rd and 12s, 3rd and 15s, and at least enough times to make sure that back end knows what's coming. They know that it's a passing down. They know that if they cut down those tight windows, then they're going to have the ability to make that big play that is going to be super important in this game. So it's one of those things that Bear Alexander's got to hold up really aggressively against that run game if he can against this incredible O-line for LSU. But at the end of the day, if they can do this, then I feel pretty good that Garrett Nussmeier is going to make at least one mistake, and maybe that's the mistake that does it for USC. Moving right along, LSU, how can they win on Sunday? Get Garrett rolling quickly. You have to get this guy's feet under him very fast because he's taken the reins for the first time. He's come in and started at different points, but this was never his team. Now it is. It's been his team since Jaden Daniels walked out the door, and it will be his team through the rest of the season unless something crazy happens. So this is one of those moments where He's just got to get comfortable. You're going out to Vegas. You're playing a big-time game at prime time on Saturday. Just let him get into the game. Let him throw those drag routes. Let him throw, a couple of screens out to Chris Hilton and let him go. Let Kyron Lacey go up and get one. All of these things just to get his confidence boosted, see the ball be caught a couple of times, and then he's one of those guys like Connor Wegman that it's going to be really hard to stop if he gets rolling downhill. So that's definitely a huge thing for that offense. But then on the defensive side of the ball, the D-line just got to hold their own. It doesn't have to be pretty. In fact, I frankly think they're going to lose the battle, but just don't lose it by a ton. Just don't get dominated in the battle is the ultimate goal for this defense. Whether it's Jacobian Guillory or Jalen Lee or some of the other players out there, they just got to make enough plays. This USC O-line is good. It's not necessarily fantastic, but it's definitely good enough. And I think they're going to have a little bit of trouble getting consistent push. If they can make those one couple of plays, if they can get that one tackle in the backfield to force a 3rd and 12, and then they got to pass the ball downfield, then maybe you get one of the other keys to this win is couple of the big defensive plays. Just a couple of plays where you make that big-time one on the defensive side of the ball, and things get really interesting in a hurry. Whether it's Ashton Stamps making an awesome play on a ball to get a pick, or Harold Perkins having a strip sack, or Javian Toviano hitting someone really, really hard to force to get a 4th down stop, whatever that looks like. Make those couple of plays. The margins in this game are going to be remarkably thin. All LSU or USC, for that matter, has to do is just make that one play. Whether it's Braden Swinson coming off the edge for LSU, or USC, it's Bear Alexander knocking down a pass on 3rd and 10. Whatever that looks like, just make that one big play and then let your offense go to work, because there's going to be plenty of points in this game. And this was a really, really tough one to pick. We know it's going to be a track meet. We know these teams are going to be flying up and down the field, and likely it comes down to one big defensive play. I'm terrified to make this pick, but at the end of the day, I'm going to go with the best player on the football field, and that's Harold Perkins. Harold Perkins and the Tigers, I think, take this one 41-35. I would not touch the line with a 10-foot pole. That's a nightmare of a line where both these teams could win this one by 14. Both these teams could win this one by 1. It would be a nightmare to try to decide which side of that line you want to go on. I would pick the over. There's no doubt about that. The over, let me check here real quick. The over is set at 64.5. That is a lofty over. These defenses are not good. I'm just being plainly honest. I think we're going to see plenty of points on Sunday, and another Sunday game in these slate of Week 1 games is going to deliver. I do have LSU winning. I do not feel great about it. So it's going to be awesome to watch that one unfold, and we'll obviously break it down on Monday and see how wrong I was or how right I was. Hopefully it's on the right side of things. But at the end of the day, it's going to be incredible to watch those games go down. Those are two of the games that I'm probably circling the most, right up there with Miami versus Florida. But at the end of the day, very, very hard to pick, but I feel pretty good as of right now. I'm going to take A&M, I'm going to take LSU, and then we'll see where the chips fall after this weekend. But let's get into the best of the rest. Right after this break, we'll get into all of the games that I just haven't touched on throughout the week that we got to touch on. There are a couple of incredible games that might be a little bit under the radar that we just got to be able to at least get an idea of what we're going to see and why it's definitely worth your time to watch. So we'll break it down right after this, so stick with us.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the LSU versus USC game. An absolute shootout is going to happen in Vegas this upcoming weekend. I am picking LSU to come out on top 41-35, but man, it could go either way. It's going to be an incredible game, and I have a feeling that one defensive player is going to be the story of the game with one defensive play. But we'll figure out what happens on Sunday night. But let's get to the rest of the games that I just haven't gotten a chance to talk about throughout the week that you're going to want to at least keep your eye on. You might not have to tune in for the entirety of the 4 quarters, but you're definitely going to want to make sure you know what the score is in these, because maybe they get a little bit more interesting than you're expecting as of right now. But let's start this off, and I think the biggest one that I want to touch on, or not the biggest one by any means that I want to touch on, but the first one I want to touch on is Oklahoma versus Temple. This one goes on tonight, Friday, 8 p.m., but this one's not going to be close. I'm not necessarily implying that it's going to be close, but there's a couple of big things to watch for here. Oklahoma is a team that's going into this year that feels really good about a number of different pieces of this team, whether it's quarterback or wide receiver or running back. Wide receiver actually took a little bit of a hit with Nick Anderson not playing in this game, but I'm sure he'll be fine for week 2 and they'll move forward from there. But at the end of the day, Oklahoma's going to have so many big tests in the future. I want to see this team just tear them to pieces. I want to see Jackson Arnold airing the ball out downfield and doing all of the incredible things he can do with his arm. I want to see this offensive line absolutely push this Temple defensive line that, frankly, Temple is not a good team. This would be an absolute blowout, should be a total domination, but I want to see just really clean football from the offensive line and from Jackson Arnold. And if you do that, at least you go into the second week feeling really confident. You know, obviously none of the questions are going to be answered in this game, but if you can get out of that game with no picks from Jackson Arnold and the offensive line totally dominant, you feel a little bit better. Now on the flip side, if Jackson Arnold makes a couple of mistakes in this O-line and looks a little bit porous against Temple, you're going to have some problems, and this season might get really ugly really quickly for Oklahoma, honestly. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a really interesting one to watch tonight, and one of those that maybe the score won't be all that interesting, but at least the nuances of that game will tell us a lot about this new SEC team. Moving forward, we have another really good one tonight at 10:30. They're going to kick off TCU versus Stanford. TCU favored by about 9 here, over-under at 59.5, and this is a fascinating game. TCU's coming back after what was a really, really bad year after the national title run, and Stanford obviously kind of reeling in the shadows, a little bit underappreciated in some respects, I think, going into this year, but TCU goes into year 2 with Josh Hoover at the helm, and Cam Cook is the guy that I want to talk about because he was a freshman last year, got injured, wasn't able to play the amount that he wanted, and he's finally healthy again. He is downright scary. I think he's going to be so much fun to watch this upcoming year. And then on the other side, you have a really good quarterback wide receiver connection between Ashton Daniels and Alec Ayomanyor. It's going to be really, really fun. I think this one's going to be a little bit up and down. I think both defenses are still trying to find themselves, and TCU with a lot of the transfers, that offensive line might be a little bit more porous than we want it to be. I do think they're more talented, but maybe putting it all together just doesn't happen quite as quickly. I do think TCU is going to be able to win this one. I wouldn't necessarily pick them to cover, though. I think this one could be a real battle, and especially out there in Palo Alto, I think they might just be able to keep this one a little bit close for Stanford, but I am going to pick TCU to win and this to be Cam Cook's kind of coming out party, if you will, in week 1. Moving forward, this is the one for me. Virginia Tech heading over to Vandy is one that I think some people are kind of shrugging off because it's Vandy, and I understand that. I do get that. Don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, Kyron Jones coming in with Virginia Tech, a ton of hype, no doubt about it. Diego Pavia coming in from New Mexico State to Vanderbilt to take over the quarterback position, and this guy's capable of some special things. We saw it last year in Jordan-Hare Stadium when he took down Auburn at New Mexico State, and they're hoping they can get some of that magic on Saturday. This is a very, very interesting matchup because Virginia Tech looks like the better team. They are the better team. They're more talented, and they have a lot of hype heading into this year. Vandy's got nothing to lose, and I kind of like that. I think it's one of those lines where you look at it and you say, well, of course Virginia Tech's going to beat Vandy by more than 14 points. I wouldn't be so sure. I think this one might just be a little bit closer than some people think, and I think Vandy's going to lose this game, don't get me wrong, but I think some things could look clunky for Virginia Tech early on, and they win this one maybe by 7 or 10 points, but not by the margin that some people, I think that's going to happen in this game. But going to be a low-scoring affair, so we'll see what happens in that one. This is another one that's just outright awesome. Oklahoma State playing South Dakota State, I absolutely love. On Saturday at 2 p.m. Oklahoma State favored by 9.5 right now, 53.5 over-under, and this is one you're going to want to watch. An FBS versus FCS matchup, and I know that's not the most tantalizing thing in the world. SDSU is just a special team, downright. There's plenty of teams in the FBS. I would bet the majority of the teams in the FBS are not as good as the South Dakota State team. This is a very, very good team, and they're led by probably the best player in the FCS, and Mark Gronowski. He was the winner of the Walter Payton Award winner a year ago, kind of the Heisman of the FCS, if you don't know, but a very, very important player, and someone that could be a little bit groundbreaking because there are people talking about him for the NFL draft. It would be awesome to see an SDSU quarterback find their way into the draft. But at the end of the day, this one's going to be really interesting. Both teams are very experienced. They're going to run the ball. Obviously, Ollie Gordon on the other side, but SDSU is going to run the ball plenty as well. It's going to be really fun. I think this one's going to come down really to the wire, and I think you might just turn on your TV or check your phone at 5 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday and say, South Dakota State's really in this game. So this is one definitely to watch out of the side of your eye. There is a reason that Oklahoma State is not favored by 21 in this game. They're favored by 9.5. So it's going to be really, really fun, and I would not be surprised if the Jackrabbits left there with a win. We saw Oklahoma State lose to South Alabama a year ago. Not crazy to think South Dakota State could do the exact same thing this year. Moving on, Houston versus UNLV is just so much fun. I think this one's going to be off the charts awesome. When you have Houston only favored by 2.5 points at home against a non-Power 5 opponent, you're likely going to get a pretty good game. I love this game top to bottom. I think when you look at the quarterbacks they have on either side, it's going to be a ton of fun. Two very different styles. Donovan Smith, a very talented quarterback that NFL scouts are talking about as being a very talented guy at the next level. I haven't necessarily bought into that quite as much, but still a very talented kid. Definitely could do some really good things. And then Matthew Sluka stepping in for Jaden Mayava, who made his way over to USC, and a very talented kid coming over from Holy Cross. And then you got the play callers. Willie Fritz against Brennan Marion is going to be about as fun as you will have watching offensive football this entire year. So incredible, incredible matchups. I think one of the big-time things in this game is going to be what does Donovan Smith do on those QB-designed runs. He's a very, very talented, athletic kid, and I think it's going to be a little bit off the walls, if I'm being totally honest with you. I think this game is going to be back and forth all over the place, but frankly, I think UNLV has the best player on the field in Ricky White. I think that player is downright special, and I think Houston might just be in for a bad loss on Saturday, and UNLV might just roll into this season and get a big-time win. So it's a weird game. It's one of those games that is going to be close. I can almost promise you that. But if you're really, really into play design, watch this game because you're just going to love what Brennan Marion does, and you're going to absolutely love what Willie Fritz does. I can promise you that. Moving on, Georgia Tech, Georgia State is one that I'll touch on for very, very short because 20-point line, nothing crazy, over-under at 55.5, but there's been a little bit of a pattern that has formed around Georgia Tech over the last couple of years. Last year, they only won back-to-back games one time. It was UNC, and then this says Vanderbilt. I don't think that's correct. Maybe that's correct. I'm not sure actually. But and then in his first couple of games as the interim, they were able to win 2 in a row. Those are the only 2 times that he was able to win 2 in a row during his head coaching career at Georgia Tech. And last year they beat a Wake Forest team, then lost to Bowling Green, or they beat a Miami team in crazy fashion and then got dominated by Syracuse the next week. So I'm not saying that Georgia Tech's going to lose. I tend to believe that they're going to win in this game, but you might just want to keep one eye on this game throughout this one because maybe it's a little bit closer down the stretch than you're thinking. James Madison playing Charlotte. There's this one made a ton of headlines this week for a matchup that frankly is not near the top of the list, but at the end of the day, James Madison favored by 8 points in this game, 47.5 over under, and Biff Poggi, the head coach for Charlotte and one of my favorite football characters in the entire country, said this team is going to be down at least 8, maybe 9 starters in this game. I don't know how that happens. I don't know how it's not, if you lose 2 or 3 or 4 starters, you're not just shutting down fall camp. But at the end of the day, there's going to be a big-time question mark around that part of this team. And then on the other side, JMU has a little bit of a QB problem. Dylan Morris came in from Washington and figured to be the starter, but Alonzo Barnett the third is a very talented player, battled with McLeod a year ago to get that starting job, and I believe won it for a time being before Jordan McLeod took over. A very, very talented team, and JMU coming off that incredible year, a lot of change in the offseason, want to hit the ground running, and I expect them to. I think this one might just end up being well above that number 8 line, and I think JMU just rolls in this one, if I'm being honest. So a ton of really good games, but the final one I want to touch on, Wyoming against Arizona State. This one's interesting to me just because that line should not be 7. If it's Arizona State against Wyoming, the line just in general should not be 7, but a very good Wyoming team walking in. Evans Zvoboda, a very talented quarterback for Wyoming that fully understands this offense and has a lot of really good players around him. Now, Arizona State on the other side has some questions at quarterback. Sam Leavitt is taking over the transfer from Michigan State. They have tons of running back talent, whether it's Cam Scatabo on your screen right there. Raleek Brown's a very talented transfer from USC, so they got plenty of guys. They might have 4 different backs that they could throw at you, so a very talented team. Wyoming beat another Big 12 team a year ago in Texas Tech. That one was at home, so a little bit different of circumstances, but this one's going to be close. I can promise you that. This one's going to be a little bit sketchy, and an Arizona State team that has a lot to figure out might just come out just a little bit clunky, and Wyoming might be able to steal one for the second time in a row against a Big 12 opponent. But this one's going to be incredible. This week, we've been talking about all of these games and kind of spreading them out throughout the week to make sure we get all of you guys everything that you want to see, but it's going to be awesome. There's so many incredible games this upcoming weekend. There's so many different storylines. There's so many different upset alerts and everything that you could possibly want from a week 1 in college football. So we're about to get into it, but we're going to take our final break here, and we'll finish off the show just giving you a little bit of a headline weekend wrap-up. Just kind of go around all the different stories around college football that we haven't gotten a chance to get to because of all the craziness that is going on. So we'll get to that right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about all of the rest of the games that we didn't get quite a chance to really get into throughout the week that you just got to keep your eyes on. There are a couple of upsets that could be happening, especially that South Dakota State-Oklahoma State game. Just watch that one. I promise you're not going to be disappointed. But let's get into a little bit of a headline weekend wrap-up because there is so much stuff that has happened throughout this week, but we've had a lot of games to cover. We've had a lot of things to get ready for in week 1, so haven't had quite the chance to get into all of this stuff the way that I wanted to, but we'll start with the one that I think a lot of people have been talking about, or I know a lot of people have been talking about. Connor Stalions. The documentary officially came out around Connor Stalions and the sign-stealing scandal around Michigan. There were a ton of really, really interesting stuff on here, and Netflix really knows how to tell a story. I can say that pretty confidently coming out of this one. They told a very, very interesting, very touching, very grandiose story is the way that I'll put it in the nicest possible terms. But the biggest thing that came out of this had very little to do with Connor Stalions, honestly. Dan Wetzel was on there, and he dropped a bomb. He said a number of teams could get caught for this. He said, I believe Utah. He said, I believe Ohio State. He said, I believe Clemson could get caught. There were so many different people that he said he could get caught because he had FOIA or FOIA what are they called? Requests, excuse me, to get all of this information. And it sounds like plenty of people are doing this throughout the country. Now, that's obviously not the point because Michigan was the one that got caught. Michigan is the one that we're talking about. And just a couple of things before we move on, because I don't want to give this one too much credence because I didn't think it was all that great in terms of actually telling the story as it happened, but that's beside the point. Number one thing, he lied in this a couple of times. It's not that I'm like tearing him down for lying about it, but he definitely lied in this thing a couple of times. He said he never advanced scout. Give me a break. He said that he didn't buy the tickets he only bought the tickets for his family and he was the only one buying them. Give me a break. I know, like, the salary is just not good enough. There's no world where he's able to buy all of those tickets by himself. I don't know if it was that, anonymous or that crazy booster that everyone's talking about, but it definitely wasn't just Connor Stallions. I can say that pretty confidently. Number two, I can say with as much confidence as ever, a ton of people in this program knew what was going on. If you're asking me to believe that Jim Harbaugh or Sharon Moore or Jesse Minter didn't know what was going on, you're asking me to believe that they're stupid, and that is not something that I'm going to do. They knew exactly what was going on. They understood all. They didn't understand all of the little intricacies of the things that were happening. They knew grandiose that they were breaking the rules. You would have a really hard time convincing me otherwise. Number three, Connor Stallions is a downright brilliant man. There's no two ways about that. There's no argument on the other side. He is brilliant. He is driven. He wants to do anything he can, obviously, to get Michigan to that national title. But at the end of the day, Michigan didn't need it. I stand by that. Michigan did not need him to go on the run that they did a year ago. We saw them win big-time games when he was sitting in the sidelines and calling everyone his brothers and all of that stuff. We saw all of that. So I'm not taking anything away from Michigan's title because of this, but at the end of the day, this is a guy that is downright brilliant, but downright weird as well. I'll just put it that way. Ohio State, this was a big topic of conversation. Did Ohio State turn Connor Stallions in? I don't know, and frankly, I do not care. I genuinely don't care if it was Ryan Day himself, if it was Ryan Day's daughter, if it was someone random that saw him filming the game. It does not make any difference to me who turned him in. I just care what the facts are. I care, what actually happened in this investigation. And then, finally, it was a well-done story. It didn't do what it could have done, which is actually tell the full story of what happened. It didn't do what it could have done, which is kind of make this a much more convoluted, confusing conversation at the end, but Connor Stallions was a producer on this documentary, so I wasn't necessarily expecting anything else. Overall, this didn't change anything about the NCAA investigation. They're still going to be fine. They're still probably going to pay a small monetary fee and then move on with their day. So overall, it's one of those things that had some interesting stories in there, had some things that might come up a little bit later on, and Connor Stallions is back in football. He has been hired at the high school in Detroit, Mumford High School over there in Detroit, Michigan, but I don't want this guy back in college football. I think that should be the sweeping rule going forward for him in particular. But also, at the end of the day, it might not matter. He'll probably get hired somewhere, and if he doesn't, then a variation of him will pop up. So this is going to be something. I can promise you that, and I can promise you that Netflix contributed to that with the way that they told this story. But I'm not going to get mad about this one. I'm a little bit sick of getting mad about this Michigan situation. Just get me to the finish line. Let's move on. Let's play some football, and let's see what Michigan is after Connor Stallions, officially after Connor Stallions. But it's going to be awesome to watch. It was a good documentary in terms of telling a story. It wasn't all that great in terms of telling the full story of what happened, but that's what I expected. Moving on, Faison Brandon has sued North Carolina over the NIL laws. It sounds like the North Carolina Board of Education is very much against endorsement deals for the student athletes in public high schools. And this is something that a lot of people have been fighting all across the country. His mother is joining him in this suit. And frankly, this is one that I think is kind of a layup. I think he's going to win out on this one. I think he's going to get the rights to sign whatever deal he wants. And this is a free market. This is just the reality of the situation. This is a very valuable player that has a ton of potential at the next level. If you're a trading card company, which is what this kind of originated from, a trading card company coming to him with a deal, if you're a trading card company and want to sign on with Faison Brandon, who am I to stop you? I've never really understood this. I understand that they are kids and that makes things a little bit more precarious, but if they want to do that, if they want to go out and do a deal with this kid, I am not going to be the one to stop him. So personally, I hope he wins. I think he will win at the end of the day, and I think it'll likely be totally normal around high school football in 5 years to get NIL deals like this. Moving on, the NCAA has passed a redshirt exemption for the postseason, essentially just meaning anyone that has played 3 games into the postseason, if they play that 4th, they're not dead. Or if they play that 5th, they're not, out of eligibility for that year. The postseason games do not count towards that, and frankly, I think this is a pretty layup of a decision. This is something that absolutely needed to happen because you don't want to put guys in positions where they've played 4 games and they want a redshirt because they want one more year, or they want a redshirt because they want to transfer, and they have to make that decision of how they're going to play. Or on the other side, you don't want coaches having to force kids to play that are then going to lose their red shirt. So it's one of those kind of battles that has gone back and forth, and frankly, I think it's a pretty easy example. Florida State last year, there were a couple of guys that had to burn their red shirts in that game because of all the opt-outs. That's not something you want to happen, especially because those kids had nothing to do with them being put in or them being thrust into that position. So a huge decision, and one that relatively a layup for the NCAA to make. DeMarco Murray has been suspended from Oklahoma for the game tonight, actually against Temple. I blanked there for a second, but apparently he had 65 impermissible phone calls, 36 impermissible text messages, involving 17 prospects over a 16-month span. So some recruiting violations out there. It's one of those things that whenever I see recruiting violations at this point, I kind of scroll on past it because it's usually not all that big of a deal. DeMarco Murray will be back on the sideline next Saturday, and they'll be more than fine. This is one of those that, yeah, the NCAA just kind of wants to show they have a little bit of juice at the very least. So he is suspended, but doesn't really make too much of a difference about Oklahoma this week or going forward. Staying with Oklahoma, Danny Stutzman did a really incredible thing around NIL. He gave a lot of NIL money of his own to the walk-ons on that team. Just a really, really cool thing. It's one of those, another example of why NIL is such a cool thing in the sport, because if it's utilized the correct way, it is absolutely incredible for so many of these kids, especially those walk-ons that sometimes they just don't get anything. Sometimes they're just there for the love of the game, but getting a little bit of love from some of those elite players on your team is just always so cool to watch, and shows how close that team is over there in Norman. So huge shout out to Danny Stutzman, a dude on the field and even maybe more of a dude off it. So incredible for that. And then another incredible NIL thing happened over at Colorado this past week. Deion Sanders set up a kind of a plan with a bank near Colorado's campus, where they were going to set all the fathers up on the team with a $529 savings plan for their kid, and they would put $2,121. Deion's iconic 21 kind of playing in there, but it's one of those things that's a great thing to do. It shows me time and again, when you see the genuine interactions between Deion and his players, there is no one in the world that can tell me he does not care about those kids. He put those kids above pretty much everything else and does an incredible job of making sure they're in the right space, and this is great. Puts them in a great financial space, makes them feel a little bit more confident about how they can handle the fatherly duties along with playing college football. So a very, very good thing, and one of those things that makes you feel just good about this NIL world where stuff like this can happen now, and that's just awesome. Staying with Colorado, they had a very more than funny more than anything else, if I'm being totally honest with you, allegation against Oregon. They say Oregon stole some practice tape before their matchup, and they alleged that after the matchup and decided they were not going to provide any evidence for that. And the server that they used to film their practices, Catapult, conducted their own investigation and decided there was no evidence for a breach. So they wasted a lot of their own time here, and frankly, I won't waste a lot of your time here. Michigan did not need the practice tape. They did not need the practice tape to tear apart that O-line and to beat them. Frankly, they could have beat them by 70 that day. They just decided to take their foot off the gas pedal. So if they did steal the game tape, then I don't know why they did, because it was going to be domination one way or the other. So that was one of those that I kind of just chuckled at and moved on, but definitely a funny story throughout college football. And then finally, SEC is requiring injury reports throughout this year. So this is going to be a really interesting thing. You got to have guys that are available, probable, questionable, doubtful, or out in the report. I believe the day of or the day before the game. You love it. Frankly, I love it a ton because it makes it a little bit easier to break down some of these games when you know exactly who's going to be out and exactly who's going to be in. But at the end of the day, a layup of a decision, something that likely should happen across the country because it's one of those things that I think coaches think they're playing this big-time cat and mouse game when in reality, usually you know if a guy is healthy or not just by watching the play that he got injured on and knowing all of the different intel that you get from inside that program away from the coach. It's very unlikely that there's an injury that really surprises you. But at the end of the day, I think having this stuff on paper, having this stuff, uniform across the entirety of college football just makes a lot of sense. So overall, a busy week. There's no two ways about that. We had an incredible game last Saturday that got us kicked off with Georgia Tech, Florida State. We have a ton of incredible games tomorrow. I feel like on Saturday it was a little bit of a light drizzle. Yesterday was, a little bit of a thunderstorm. You heard thunder in the distance. You saw a little bit of rain come down. Tomorrow it is a downpour. It's going to be incredible to watch all of these games happen all across. Get all of your TVs out. Use every single TV you have at your disposal because you're going to want plenty of games on in every single slot. It's going to be incredible to watch this, and college football is officially back. Sometimes people write off week 0 or they write off that early Thursday games, but Saturday is when it really kicks off, and I just cannot wait. One more sleep till we get this thing back in full effect, and it's going to be really fun to watch. No two ways about that. But that'll do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference for us. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all of the social pages for all of the content and updates you could possibly need. We have really incredible people doing awesome work across every single sport, so although I know you guys love college football and are going to be tuned in to that on Sunday, we got great people covering NFL on Sunday, you're going to be tuned into that on Saturday. There are tons of people covering NFL that is going to be all on Sunday. Absolutely tune in there. Nelson's doing basketball. That is still plenty of stuff happening around basketball during the postseason, so tune in over there. There is so much stuff happening on the GSMC pages, so anything in the world of sports, come on over to us and we absolutely have you covered. But thank you once again for listening, and I will see you guys tomorrow.